At family dinner, my sister sneered. Some people just love being needed, even when they're not. Everyone turned to me. I raised my glass and said, "Good news, then I'm not." Then I pulled out my phone, opened the banking app, and froze the account funding her rent. 5 minutes later, she was pale. My mom whispered, "What did you just do?" I smiled and shocked them with my answer. At my mother's birthday dinner, my sister Lauren leaned back and said, with the smile she used whenever she wanted to insult me without sounding openly cruel, "Some people need to feel indispensable, even when nobody asked them to be." The room went still. She never said my name, but she didn't have to. Everyone knew who had been paying the bills she pretended not to need. I lifted my glass, met her eyes, and said, "That's great news, because I'm done being indispensable." Then I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app, and canceled the recurring transfer that had covered her rent for 8 straight months. Lauren's face changed before anyone else understood. My mother gave a nervous laugh and asked whether I was really doing this on her birthday. I told her I wasn't making a scene. I was ending one. For 8 months, I had paid $2,300 every month for the apartment Lauren shared with her husband Evan and their 2 children. I hadn't volunteered. I had been pushed into it, one guilt-heavy call at a time. Every hesitation became a lecture about the children, family, and how Lauren was trying. Evan hadn't worked in more than 3 years. Lauren drifted between startup ideas and promises that her next opportunity would change everything. Somehow, I had become the invisible system keeping their life afloat. The dining room was full of the usual relatives. Uncle Greg was talking real estate. My cousin Derek was scrolling through videos. Grandpa barely spoke, but noticed everything. Lauren had spent dinner describing a business idea involving food delivery and blockchain. Everyone nodded politely. Then came her remark about people who loved being needed. That was the moment something in me finally hardened. I told her the rent was hers from now on, and the startup money she expected from me was gone too. Mom's expression tightened. "You're doing this tonight?" she asked. I asked whether she wanted me to lie tonight instead. For years, Lauren was treated as the struggling daughter, and I was treated as the fortunate one, which somehow made her choices my responsibility. I looked at her and said, "Your apartment, your business, your life, handle them yourself." Grandpa quietly added, "This should have happened a long time ago." Nobody challenged him. I left before dessert. By morning, I had missed calls from Mom, one from Lauren, and a long message from Evan about the children, loyalty, cruelty, and consequences. Every sentence made my help sound like a permanent debt. I didn't answer. The first of the month was approaching, and I knew what they believed. I would calm down, feel guilty, and restore the payment. They had no backup plan because I had always been the backup plan. When rent day arrived, nothing moved from my account. That evening, Lauren texted, "You're not seriously doing this, right?" I left it unanswered. The next morning, Mom called twice while I was working. When I finally answered, she skipped hello and accused me of abandoning my own blood. I told her I was ending an arrangement that should never have become permanent. She reminded me that Lauren had children. I reminded her I wasn't their parent. Then she started lecturing me about responsibility. That word almost made me laugh. My mother had spent years treating her 37-year-old daughter like a teenager trapped by bad luck. She never asked why Lauren lived in a nicer apartment than I did, where her money went, or why Evan could complain about work without applying for any. Instead, she asked me how I could sleep at night if I refused to keep them comfortable. Before she hung up, I said, "You can keep calling me selfish, or you can start asking why your grown daughter needs me to keep her household running." A few days later, Uncle Greg called and told me I had done the right thing. He said Grandpa had told everyone after dinner that someone finally needed to stop feeding the circus. I hadn't realized how many relatives were quietly tired of watching Lauren perform helplessness while I financed it. Their silence had not always meant agreement. Sometimes nobody else wanted the fight. Then the rent bounced, and panic became real. Evan accused me by text of cruelty, classism, and financially endangering children, as though I had forced two adults to build a life they couldn't sustain. I replied once, "It is not my responsibility to finance your household." He answered with threats, including talk of a lawyer. I didn't engage. The money wasn't delayed or paused. It was finished. During the second week, Lauren wrote, "Okay, I need help. Just this once. We're looking. No apology." A day later, she promised to pay me back. I ignored that too. Mom texted, "You've made your point, now stop." I knew she meant start paying again. That weekend, Evan appeared at my regular coffee shop even though he lived 40 minutes away. He called it a coincidence, then immediately told me I was hurting the children. When I said insults and requests for money didn't belong in the same conversation, he snapped, "You can afford it, Samantha." I answered, "I can afford plenty of things. I'm simply not paying for this anymore." He stormed out. The following Wednesday, Lauren left a voicemail. It began angry and ended desperate. She begged for one more month, just until they figured something out. I still didn't respond. Friday night, Uncle David called. "They're packing," he said. "They didn't pay. The landlord's forcing them out. I waited for guilt to hit me. It didn't." David added, "Don't mistake consequences for cruelty." By Saturday, Lauren and her family were gone. Even Mom went strangely silent. 3 days later, Derek sent me a grainy photograph of Lauren dragging a mattress up a rusted staircase above a dry cleaner, while Evan stood below with the children beside flattened boxes. The building looked cramped and painfully ordinary. The illusion was finally gone. Then, Thursday afternoon, Lauren texted, "We need to talk. I found something while we were moving." 10 minutes later, she called sounding wired and exhausted. In an old box of mail, she had found a sealed envelope addressed to Mom from a law office, dated more than a year earlier. It mentioned Dad, a forgotten parcel of land in Nevada, and a payout neither of us had ever heard about. I went silent. Lauren lowered her voice. "Samantha," she said, "Mom had money this entire time." Lauren's voice sounded different when she explained what she had found. The letter came from a law office and concerned a piece of land Dad had bought in Nevada years earlier, back when he still believed one strange investment might someday become valuable. Apparently, he had been right. A company had purchased the property, and the settlement had been roughly $63,000. Mom had signed for the money more than a year ago. Lauren had also found contractor invoices tucked into the same box granite countertops, a new refrigerator, cabinet work, and a custom backsplash, all ordered within months of the payout. I sat there holding the phone, trying to understand the sheer calculation behind it. Mom had watched me transfer $2,300 every month to keep Lauren's family in an apartment they couldn't afford. She had called me selfish whenever I hesitated. She had asked how I could sleep, knowing children might lose their home. All while she had tens of thousands of dollars she never mentioned. Lauren finally said quietly, "She let you pay my rent while she remodeled her kitchen." And suddenly Mom's silence after the eviction made perfect sense. For several seconds neither of us spoke. Then Lauren said something I had never heard from her before. "Samantha, I'm sorry." There was no excuse afterward, no explanation about bad luck, no attempt to make me partially responsible. She simply admitted she had spent years expecting me to fix problems she created. Hearing that hurt in a strange way because I had wanted those words for so long that I had stopped believing they could ever sound sincere. Before we ended the call, Lauren said, "I have to do better. I don't know how yet, but I have to." That night, Grandpa texted me, saying Mom wasn't answering him either. I didn't chase her. Instead, the next morning, I called an old college friend who had become a hiring director at a rapidly growing logistics company. I asked whether he would consider someone whose resume had more gaps than achievements, but who might finally be ready to work. He laughed and told me they cared more about reliability than polish. "What's her story?" he asked. I told him, "She needs a second chance. This time I think she actually understands that." Lauren showed up for the interview in a wrinkled blouse, inexpensive shoes, and the kind of nervous expression I hadn't seen on her since we were teenagers. She got the job. The hiring manager called me afterward and said she was rough around the edges, but had looked him directly in the eye and admitted she was tired of failing her children. The position wasn't glamorous. Hourly pay, overtime, 48-hour weeks, early mornings, and long shifts. But it had benefits, stability, and a path upward. More importantly, nobody was paying Lauren simply because she existed. She had to show up. On her first day, she texted me, "My feet are killing me. Weirdly, I feel good." I smiled at that. For the first time, I had helped her without rescuing her. I had opened a door. She had to walk through it herself. The peace lasted until Friday. My phone buzzed with a message from Evan. I hadn't heard from him since the coffee shop confrontation. "I assume you're happy now," he wrote. "She comes home exhausted every night, and I'm stuck here with the kids while she plays hard-working employee. You call this helping?" I stared at those words, realizing the deepest problem in their household had not disappeared with the luxury apartment. I screenshotted the message and sent it to Lauren without comment. 5 minutes later, she called, embarrassed and furious. She said she hadn't known he contacted me. I told her she didn't need to apologize for her husband. "Actually, I do," she said, "because I'm the one who let him believe we were above this. I let him think someone would always save us." That admission mattered more than any promise about paying me back. Over the next several weeks, Lauren kept working. She woke before sunrise, packed sandwiches into a secondhand lunchbox, learned warehouse systems, stayed late when supervisors asked, and stopped talking about startups that would supposedly make her rich in 6 months. The changes were small enough that outsiders probably wouldn't have noticed, but I did. She stopped asking me for money. She stopped hinting. She even told Grandpa at a family gathering that she had finally learned what responsibility actually felt like. Uncle Greg slapped her shoulder and said, "Welcome to adulthood." Everyone laughed, including Lauren. Evan didn't. He complained about the apartment, the cheap washing machine, the noise from downstairs, and how this wasn't the life he had signed up for. He still seemed convinced someone, Mom, me, anyone, would eventually restore the comfort they had lost. Nobody did. Mom remained completely silent. She knew Lauren had found the letter. She knew Grandpa knew. She knew I knew. Instead of explaining herself, she disappeared behind the same wall she always built when reality became inconvenient. Weeks later, I stopped by Lauren's apartment because she had accidentally left a wrench in my car. Her daughter opened the door smiling, and when Lauren appeared behind her, I noticed something different immediately. She looked exhausted, but clearer somehow, like the constant fog of excuses had finally lifted. Before I left, she said, "I've been thinking about what you did." I braced myself, but she continued, "I wouldn't have changed if you hadn't cut me off." Then she looked down and added, "You basically raised me more than anyone else did." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded. 4 months passed after the birthday dinner. Lauren was still at the logistics company, and she had already been promoted to team lead on her shift. The raise wasn't enormous, but it was enough for breathing room. She and Evan could buy groceries without calculating every dollar at the register. Evan still didn't work, and he still treated ordinary household responsibilities like personal persecution, but Lauren no longer let his complaints determine her choices. Then, on a quiet Sunday morning, someone knocked on my door. Nobody casually visited my building, so I checked the peephole first. Mom stood outside, perfectly dressed, hair styled, makeup flawless, as though she were arriving at church instead of confronting the daughter she had deceived. I opened the door but didn't invite her inside. We sat in the courtyard outside my building. She began carefully. "I know there's been distance between us." I almost laughed at the phrase. Distance sounded accidental, like a storm had washed out a road. She said enough time had passed and reminded me that we were still family. Eventually, she offered an apology, but even that was carefully designed. She was sorry for how everything unfolded, not for hiding Dad's money. Not for letting me support Lauren while she remodeled her house. Not for weaponizing the children every time I questioned the payments. I asked her directly why she never told us about the $63,000. Mom said that after Dad died, she didn't want to burden you girls with complicated legal matters. Then she insisted the money wasn't mine anyway. It was Dad's, I said, and you hid it while telling everyone you were struggling. She stiffened and said she needed the money for stability and for the house. You wanted it, I corrected her. That's different. Her face hardened. Then came the sentence I knew was coming. I raised you. I supported you. And this is how you repay me? That was when I understood nothing had changed for her. Every relationship was still an account ledger in which she decided what everyone owed. I stood up and told her this had never really been about money. It was about trust. She had manipulated me into carrying Lauren's family while secretly having resources of her own, then disappeared when the truth surfaced. She stared at me as though I had become someone unfamiliar. Before I went back inside, I told her, "You're right about one thing. We are family. But that doesn't mean I owe you unlimited access to my money or my life." She stayed sitting in the courtyard. I closed the door behind me and felt something strange, not triumph, not even anger, relief. 2 weeks later, Lauren texted that Mom had visited her too and offered money. Lauren had refused it. "We're fine," she told her. A few days later, another message arrived. "Thank you, Samantha. You saved us." I stared at that sentence for a while because both of us finally understood what it meant. I hadn't saved Lauren by paying another bill. I had saved her by finally refusing to. Nearly a year had passed since Mom's birthday dinner, and the strangest thing about the silence between us was how quickly it stopped feeling like punishment. In the beginning, I kept expecting her name to appear on my phone. I imagined the Thanksgiving guilt trip, the birthday message designed to sound casual, or some emergency that would suddenly require me to forget everything. None of it came. She didn't call on my birthday. She didn't text during the holidays. She didn't send Grandpa to negotiate on her behalf. Eventually, I realized I wasn't waiting anymore. The absence I once would have interpreted as rejection had become peace. I had spent so many years believing family conflict had to end with reconciliation that I never considered another possibility. Sometimes the healthiest ending is simply distance. Lauren, meanwhile, kept surprising me. She was still at the logistics company and had moved beyond the stage where everyone treated her as the employee who needed a second chance. She had earned a permanent team lead position and was responsible for coordinating part of the evening shift. A few months earlier, she sent me a picture of herself standing inside the warehouse, wearing a reflective safety vest and holding a clipboard. She was grinning so widely she looked almost ridiculous. Under the picture she wrote, "Apparently they trust me with other people now." I stared at it longer than I expected. The woman in that photograph barely resembled the sister who once sat at Mom's dinner table talking about blockchain delivery apps while I quietly paid her rent. Lauren had changed physically too. She looked leaner from being on her feet all day, but the bigger difference was in the way she carried herself. She no longer talked as if something enormous was always about to happen to her. There were no grand promises, no imaginary investors, no mysterious opportunities that would supposedly solve everything next month. She talked about overtime, school schedules, grocery prices, and saving for car repairs. Ordinary things. Real things. She and Evan had moved out of the apartment above the dry cleaner into a cleaner 2-bedroom place in a neighborhood with decent schools. It wasn't luxurious, but the first time she showed me pictures, I noticed something that mattered more than granite counters or stainless steel appliances. Her name was on the lease, and I hadn't paid a cent toward the deposit. Evan remained the hardest part of the equation. He still wasn't working, although Lauren had stopped defending that fact whenever anyone questioned it. At the rare family gatherings I attended, he sometimes made comments about how certain people enjoyed watching others struggle. The old me would have felt compelled to defend myself. Now, I usually kept eating. Lauren didn't indulge him anymore either. She told me once that when he started blaming me for their fall from comfort, she simply walked out of the room. "I'm tired of pretending you caused what we did," she said. That sentence told me more about her growth than the promotion did. I didn't know what would eventually happen between them, and I didn't try to interfere. Their marriage was their responsibility, just like their bills were. I had finally learned that helping someone didn't mean taking ownership of every problem surrounding them. The biggest proof came one Saturday when Lauren called and asked me a question that would once have made my entire body tense. "Can I ask you something about money?" she said. I almost laughed, but she wasn't asking for any. She wanted to know whether I thought she should put her overtime pay toward an emergency fund or pay down an old credit card balance first. We talked for 15 minutes about interest rates and savings. When we finished, she said, "Okay, thanks. I just wanted your opinion." That was it. No transfer request afterward. No emergency appearing 20 minutes later. For years, every financial conversation with Lauren had ended with me opening my banking app. Now she was asking how to build something herself. The distinction felt enormous. Grandpa noticed it too. At a small family lunch, he watched Lauren arrive late from work, still wearing her company polo, apologize for being delayed, and immediately help clear the table. When she left, he looked at me and said, "Sometimes people need the floor taken away before they learn they've got legs." It sounded harsh, but I knew what he meant. I had spent years keeping Lauren upright, and then resenting her because she never learned to stand. Cutting her off had looked cruel to everyone who believed love meant preventing consequences. But consequences had done something my money never could. They had forced her to discover that she was capable. Mom remained the one subject Lauren and I rarely discussed. I knew she had occasionally contacted Lauren. I also knew she had offered to help with furniture after the move and had been politely refused. Grandpa told me Mom still insisted the Nevada money had been hers to use however she wanted. Maybe legally that was true. That was never the part I cared about. She could have kept every dollar, and still told us it existed. What broke something in me was knowing she had watched me shoulder Lauren's household month after month while deliberately presenting herself as equally helpless. She hadn't merely hidden money. She had hidden a choice, then manipulated me into making sacrifices based on a reality she knew was false. A few days before the anniversary of that birthday dinner, I came home and found an envelope in my mailbox with Lauren's handwriting on it. I assumed it was something involving the kids until I opened it and realized it was a card. Lauren had never been a card person. She barely remembered to text people on birthdays. Inside, she had written only a few sentences. She said she knew she had spent years making me the villain whenever I told her something she didn't want to hear. She admitted I had been the only person honest enough to stop enabling her. Then came the line that stayed with me. "I don't think I would have survived this year without you, not because you saved me, but because you finally stopped saving me." I sat at my desk with that card in my hands for a long time. I thought about the $2,300 transfers, the coffee shop confrontation, Mom screaming about family, Lauren dragging a mattress up a rusted staircase, the Nevada letter, and the first photograph of her wearing that reflective vest. For years, I had believed being useful was the price of belonging. If I paid, solved, covered, or rescued, then I was a good daughter and a good sister. The moment I refused, I became selfish. That birthday dinner destroyed that arrangement, but destroying it turned out to be exactly what we needed. Lauren lost an apartment and gained a life she could actually afford. She lost the fantasy that someone would always catch her and gained proof that she could catch herself. I lost the version of my mother who only seemed loving when I was useful to her, and eventually realized that version had never been as real as I wanted it to be. I still keep Lauren's card in my desk drawer. We didn't get the perfect family ending. There was no dramatic reunion where Mom confessed everything, and we all hugged around a holiday table. Some wounds don't close that neatly. Lauren and I rebuilt something quieter and more honest. Mom and I remained apart. Evan remained Evan. Life didn't transform into a sentimental movie just because one person finally learned her lesson. But when I think back to that dinner, I don't regret canceling the payment. I don't regret walking away before dessert. I don't even regret the money I lost, helping them before I finally stopped. Sometimes the only way to discover whether something can stand is to stop holding it up. Let it fall. Let everyone see what breaks. Then let the people who truly want a different life pick up the pieces themselves. Lauren did. And somewhere along the way, so did I.